Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network, home to a diverse collection of podcasts looking at married life through a nerdy lens, Star Wars, A24, Star Trek, 1994, those films that you missed out on, and much, much more. Last week, me, Kim and Dallas looked at the films of 1999, and we come now to present day and look back at the summer of 2019. So Dallas, welcome back to the present.
Thanks, I've managed to make it back intact. As far as I'm aware, my family are still the same. I'm still in all my photographs, so I think we managed to avoid disrupting the space-time continuum on our trip back. So.
Yeah, thanks to my watching many an episode of Star Trek, I'm all too aware of how to handle time travel, so I felt we've done quite well to get here to the present day without too much disruption. There's been a lot of debate had about the summer of 2019, both positive and negative, and we've now kind of come to the end of the summer of 2019. We are probably about 9 minutes away from being announced that we're going to have another general election, and the gloom and despair of autumn kicks in, but it seems like we're going to now look back at what summer 2019 was like, our reaction to some of the big films, the counter-programming releases, and maybe our general opinions on where this summer maybe has gone right or wrong and what it might have to say about the future. So there's often debate had about when summer starts, and it feels like since Marvel started owning a big release at the end of an April period, that's when the summer officially kicks off. But we had a debate offline when we were sort of talking about how we're going to kickstart this one of, do we go with when Avengers Endgame started? But you made a good point that we should start in sort of the traditional date of mid-May. What made you pick mid-May, Dallas, as the starting point for the summer?
Well, I think one, Disney and Marvel are a case onto their own. I think they're that big that they can release a film at any day and time of the year and it will still be huge. I don't think they need to accept the normal sort of patterns and rules of. Also, they have far too many films to be able to squeeze into a tight summer period, so they can release them whenever they want, and they know that they're going to basically hit 1 billion anyway. So I thought a bit discounting them, because basically the summer blockbuster season, as we know it now, sort of kind of started in sort of 1977 and 1975 with Jaws, but you don't really have a trend until someone else does it. And Star Wars, the original Star Wars, was released on the 25th of May 1977. I think it's the sort of traditional Memorial Day weekend in America, and for many people and for many cinemas certainly seems to be the true start of the blockbuster race over the summer. And that was the weekend that we sort of got sort of John Wick 3 and Aladdin and Rocket Man all sort of being released around about that week. So I figured that was probably the best week to be able to, for the true start of summer. Also the weather, you're guaranteed slightly better weather then. Well, fingers crossed, but you never know with the UK anyway, so, or global warming.
Absolutely, what a wonderful thought. But I think we sort of kicked off in mid-May with Pokemon and John Wick 3. So did you catch, that's a stupid question certainly regarding John Wick 3, but did you catch these two to sort of kick off the summer season?
I did, yeah. I actually have to say that Pokemon was actually one of my surprises of the summer. I was not expecting to like it, but I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was actually very good at introducing you to the world. Even if you weren't a Pokemon fan, you could kind of still follow what was going on, and it had enough sort of, I like the film noir style story of it. I thought Ryan Reynolds as Pikachu, I thought, was inspired casting, although there's certainly a plot point to be made later on about the use of his voice and its relation to another lead character that when you leave the film, you start going, hang on, wouldn't he have? And it's like, well, the whole thing kind of falls apart. But for while I was watching it, I did actually find it rather enjoyable.
Yeah, I enjoyed sort of the Pokemon one as well. I didn't think I thought it was very middle of the road, really, in sort of the grand scheme of things. But in terms of like, if I was like a young kid, I think I would have enjoyed the heck out of it. I thought Ryan Reynolds was surprisingly very good as Pikachu. I thought it was what I liked was sort of just kicking around in this sort of Pokemon world and seeing what a Pokemon, world kind of looked like, and how they sort of mixed places in London with places in Scotland, and all these different places sort of used as sort of to make up a Pokemon city. I thought it was perfectly fine, really. And John Wick 3, this was one you really loved, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is probably actually one of my top, traditional summer blockbuster. I'm doing air quotes again, which is just useless on a podcast, but I'm doing air quotes for traditional summer blockbuster. Certainly something that fits into the mold of what you would expect to see. But for me, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the John Wick series. I loved the first one. The second one, maybe not as good, but still got some fantastic moments. But I mean, the knife fight scene in the opening of John Wick 3 is one of the best action sequences I've seen, especially with a crowd who are making just all these sort of grunts and oohs and those kind of noises. So I mean, it played incredibly well, and I thought the action was just superbly choreographed again. And I could spend hours in the John Wick world, and when it unsurprisingly teed itself up for a John Wick 4, I was like, I thought going into it this was going to be the end of a trilogy, but I'm like, yeah, I'll take another one, absolutely. Because, Keanu never ages, so, I think we'll still be fine. How it compares with The Matrix 4, I guess we'll have to see in a couple of years.
Yeah, I remember getting towards the end of that film going, this film doesn't feel like it's wrapping up. It feels like there's still another half an hour to go. And then it was like, oh yeah, of course there's going to be a fourth one, which after all that kind of trailers and promo that like this is the end, no, it wasn't at all. There's still more money to be milked from the John Wick franchise, and we're going to have the return of Neo in a few summers' time as well. So plenty of him to come.
Yeah, there's still life in the old dog yet. Although, actually no, there's not, because it's John Wick.
Kind of looking at America-wise, this is coming out only this week in the UK, but they went with the Souvenir as sort of the counter-programming that week in early May to kickstart the summer. What did you make of A24's counter-programming pick there?
Well, I mean, we actually saw it, I guess, around about that time, because we saw it at the Edinburgh Film Festival, and I was a big fan of this one. I thought the acting was exceptional. I really liked the visual style of the film, even though I completely thought that the film was set in the present and not in the 80s due to things like typewriters and 35mm cameras. I just thought they were hipsters, so maybe that could have been made a little bit clearer, so I'd knock a star off for that. But otherwise I still thought it was a really sort of beautiful and sort of interesting love story, really well told by Joanna Hogg, and I'm really interested to see where A24 go next with a sequel to this one as well.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. I'm glad that it's kind of finally come here to the UK for a public release, though it's not here in Edinburgh for another 5 days, which is
same in Edinburgh. Yeah, we've same in Aberdeen. We've got to wait another week before we get it.
So yeah, I think this is an interesting one. I think we'll see some really interesting kind of programming films throughout the summer ahead. But late May also brought us some independent films as well in terms of Booksmart and Ma. Obviously we've discussed Booksmart in a bit more detail in previous episodes. What did you make of Ma? Did you see that one?
I didn't see that one, no. I was sort of going through the list, and I think it just maybe came out at a time, I think, when we were prepping for the Edinburgh Film Festival, or it was just didn't really grab me, and I think I was for some reason being a bit more selective in what I went to see at the summer. There was a few of the big blockbusters, and sort of, because summer is for some reason actually a time for actually see quite a few horror releases in the summer, as well as in terms of counter programming to the big family friendly fair. They put on a few horrors and stuff like that, so I mean I missed that one, and I missed sort of Annabelle Comes Home and stuff like that. But I missed Ma. Did you catch that one?
No, I haven't. It seems to be kind of getting marketed quite heavily on sort of iTunes USA at the moment, and I'll maybe wait for it to come down a couple of bucks before picking this one up. But I think with Booksmart, for example, it feels like it was so much longer than May this one came out. It feels like people have been quoting it non-stop. It's certainly had a big impact that in a way quite a few of the kind of big films of the summer haven't had. Maybe that's us just within a sort of film Twitter, film kind of hipster bubble, but Booksmart feels like one of the more impactful films of the summer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know that I clearly follow the right people on Twitter, because all the people on Twitter were praising Booksmart and saying, you've got to see Booksmart. And I'm like, I know, I've seen Booksmart. I'm telling everyone to see Booksmart. I wasn't seeing anyone going, oh, I hated Booksmart and stuff like that. So I clearly follow the right people. But yeah, this was easily for me, this was the film of the summer for me. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and it will be in my top 3, top 5 by the end of the year, I think. It definitely was put in as a counter-programming choice. I don't think it's certainly in America, it didn't have the success that it should have. People kept saying, oh, but if it was released by Universal and was like super bad, it would have made $100 million. I'm like, I still don't think it would have made $100 million, but I think it certainly deserved to be seen by more people. But I think certainly Olivia Wilde seems to have got a great sort of bidding war on her next project, so it's clear the people in Hollywood have taken notice of her, and I think it's going to be a cult classic in years to come. I think people will really find its home on home. I'm going to say home video. I mean streaming. I guess these days no one has home videos anymore. But yeah, streaming I think will really show, and I think it'll be in many people's year-end ones. I mean, I think we've got a whole episode dedicated to it on this show, and yeah, I think it was quite clear how much we loved it.
Yeah, definitely. And an interesting sort of couple film was sort of closed up May, and that was Aladdin, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and Rocket Man. So Rocket Man, I think we'll try and start on a positive note here. What did you make of that one?
I liked it. I liked it more than Bohemian Rhapsody, that's for sure, but I wasn't overly enamoured with it. I mean, I liked the idea that Dexter Fletcher went with a sort of full-blown musical fantasy element in order to bring the songs in and stuff like that. And I can imagine at this very moment it's being adapted for a stage show in London and stuff like that. But I think I was always conscious that I was watching a film about Elton John, and I never felt I was watching like Elton John in the same way that, Bohemian Rhapsody is not a great film, but Rami Malek at times, he sort of disappears into the role, whereas I kind of felt that I was watching Taron Egerton doing a version of Elton John, which works for the film, but it didn't sort of land for me as much as I thought it might have.
Yeah, Rocket Man was one it was an enjoyable date movie for me. I went along, we had a good time, we had a chat. I haven't really remembered much of it since, but I think it's one of those ones that obviously compared to Bohemian Rhapsody, it's a superior film. I enjoyed the music. I liked that they went with the real voices to give it kind of some authenticity. I just enjoyed Rocket Man. It was a nice sort of summer film, and it's kind of weird to think that Bohemian Rhapsody is the one that got perhaps all the plaudits, won the Academy Awards, and something like Rocket Man, I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact when the nominations are made in February, but it's probably going to be perhaps the more revered film kind of in the few years to come. But I'm still baffled to this day. Something like Bohemian Rhapsody just did like an outdoor cinema screening in Edinburgh during the festival, and I believe it was a sellout at like £15 a ticket. So people are clearly going to see Bohemian Rhapsody and are unmoved or unknown about sort of the shenanigans behind the screen. But films like that, sometimes the Mamma Mia's, they find their audiences and they dig their heels in.
Yeah, no, I mean, the certain core, I mean, they're going there for the music and the songs. They're not really going for the film itself, really. And yeah, I think that's why Bohemian Rhapsody works so well. People just want to see the show. I mean, people, just go and watch, Live Aid performance on YouTube rather than Bohemian Rhapsody. Save yourself a couple of hours,
Talking of people going to see things, and Aladdin made $1 billion at the box office this summer. We haven't really touched on this one, Dallas. What did you make of that one?
$1 billion. There's no stopping the Disney freight train, is there? There really isn't. And I did some calculations, and I think in the UK, and this is a slightly depressing fact, that with Maleficent 2, Frozen 2, and Star Wars still to come out, we are looking at Disney having 9 of the top 10 films at the UK box office this year, with the only film that is not them being Spider-Man Far From Home, which is kind of half them. So it's like, there's no stopping them. And, Aladdin, it was, these pretty much cookie-cutter, identikit live-action remakes. Lion King is not a live action remake, it's an animated film, but that's another argument for another time. But the fact that people are still going to see these when they could have basically just repackaged the original animations and put them into the cinemas, probably made the same amount of money and saved themselves $200 million doing it, then yeah. I mean, I did like parts of it. I mean, the Princess Jasmine getting a bit more of a backstory, and I thought her song was actually very good, and it will probably get nominated for an Academy Award. Wouldn't have an issue with that, but the rest of it just felt kind of, yeah, I've seen all this before, and I don't know why we're having to watch it again. You know, I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm sick of it, to be honest. Like, I watched this film, I think I dozed off for a couple minutes in it, and like me and my girlfriend went along, and like we came out of it going like, why did we bother going to see that? We knew it was going to be terrible. It wasn't our cup of tea. Like, we weren't sold on the trailers. Like, what was the whole point of it all, really? And it just kind of, I just don't get. I'm just kind of bored of this whole Disney thing. Even if it was like sort of the movies paced themselves out a little bit. You know, you've got Aladdin shortly followed by sort of Lion King. It just feels like, just stop it. Even if it was a once a year thing. You know, I remember when The Jungle Book came out, and people were like, oh my god, this film's brilliant, brilliant. I didn't get it myself. But it was like, oh well, that was just a thing. But now it just becomes like a relentless thing. We've got this, and then we have Lion King, and then we've got that we've got the Lady and the Tramp coming up later this year, and like Disney Plus. It just feels like excessively shoved down our throats at this point, on top of all the other stuff. But you know, there I think ultimately is, what can you do? There's nothing to kind of stop Disney and their relentless march here.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing about Aladdin which just baffled me the most is the original animation is about 80 minutes long. This tells pretty much exactly the same story, and it's about 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's like, how did they manage to add on 40 minutes? You know, I think it's the same with The Lion King. It's about 20 minutes longer than the original animation film, and it's like they're basically telling the same story but somehow make it even longer and a bit more dull and not as interesting as the originals. You know, Will Smith, you know, he did, you know, a fine job. It turns out actually that Will Smith as a singer is actually not that great as he is as a rapper. I was actually a bit surprised at that. I thought his singing voice was actually a bit weak, but, you know, he wasn't a patch on Robin Williams, but I understand no one is going to be, so therefore he had to do it in a slightly different way. So, you know, he did that, and, you know, he was fine, but, you know, it was just, yeah, completely unnecessary. Another unnecessary film this summer.
Talking of unnecessary films of the summer, did you see Godzilla King of the Monsters?
Yes, I did, and I think I rated it 1 star. I think it was the worst blockbuster I saw this year. It was so dark. I don't think I ever saw half of the action of what was going on. I think that and X-Men Dark Phoenix for me were just total write-offs, as in terms of, yeah, just awful.
I was gonna go see this one, and I liked the Gareth Edwards Godzilla. I actually think it was quite underrated by some people. But like, I saw your review and other reviews, and I kind of kept booking a ticket to go see it and then cancelling it. And there was just like one day I was like, you know what, I'm not going to bother. Like, I do not need to see this film in the cinema. I can rent it one day or watch it on Netflix. I physically don't need to give up my time. And that was quite a rare thing for me. Like, usually these sort of films, I would go along, give it a go, because what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to waste some time. But I kind of felt so kind of influenced perhaps by your review and some others that I was like, nah, I'm just not going to bother. And I know it's up for rental now, so I might get it if it goes down to a few bucks. But yeah, I'm in no huge rush to see this. Yeah, nice enough trailer, but it just didn't inspire me at all. It just looked like kind of more of the same, and it looked very grim on screen in terms of the color palette. So yeah, I will watch it one day from the comfort of my home.
Wow, that is a damning indictment, isn't it? That 1 star reviews will put off someone with a Cineworld Unlimited card to not even bother booking a free ticket to go and see it.
Exactly. So June came along, and early June gave us the aforementioned Dark Phoenix and Men in Black International. So what did you make of these two critically acclaimed films, Dallas?
Dark Phoenix, I saw it in 2003 when they did X-Men The Last Stand. I know they went and did lots of reshoots to try and make it less like The Last Stand, but it still was pretty much identical to The Last Stand. Actually, the only bit I really enjoyed was actually the first bit where they went up into space with the space mission, because that felt kind of new and interesting and almost slightly like the X-Men animated series, which I really loved. But the rest of it was just, I mean, the main stars, I mean, Jennifer Lawrence clearly had it written into a contract that she gets killed immediately, so she didn't have to do this anymore. And Fassbender and McAvoy looked like they'd rather be somewhere else. And it just, I mean, it was a total waste of Jessica Chastain, so therefore it gets a 1 star from me from that alone, because she's one of the best actresses on the planet. and when you waste someone like her, then it's unforgivable. And I mean, we'll get it rebooted in a couple of years when they join the Disneyverse. Loads of people lose their job at Fox, but hey, we get Fantastic Four and X-Men back in the MCU.
Exactly. This was a film I genuinely thought was atrocious. I was the same as you. Like, this was like a film that had relentless negativity going in, but I'd felt like I'd seen the rest of them, and this was one I was kind of interested to be part of the discourse for one. And I was like the same in the first few minutes. Like, as I go in space, like, not too bad, not too bad. Maybe the critics are wrong. Maybe this is a film for the fans. And then just the rest of the film was just, it felt so cheap. I just, that last act where they're all having a big fight on the train, it brought nothing new. It felt like a contract obligation for every single person. And again, what a waste of Jessica Chastain. It was a really limp end to a franchise that gave us some real high points at times. You think X2, Days of Future Past, Logan, and then Dark Phoenix was definitely one of the lowest of the lows. And some of the pieces that came out of the behind the scenes fallout was quite interesting to read, but definitely a poor film. But talking of, on the opposite end, Men in Black International. Come on, Dallas, did you enjoy that one?
I never saw it in the end. I'd heard so many just negative things, or just not even negative, more just indifference towards it, and so many jokes about, oh, they'll forget it in a week, or, using the neuralizer, I wish I could erase this from my mind, blah, 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 that I just never really got round to going to see it. It never got that, which is odd because it had Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson in it, who were great together in Thor Ragnarok. So therefore, if you can't recapture that kind of chemistry, then you're clearly doing something wrong. And yeah, it's still one which I probably will never actually go and see unless it happens to randomly appear on Netflix, and I really don't have anything else on my list that I'd rather be watching. So, did you catch that one?
Yeah, I did go along to see this one. I saw this one with my girlfriend. I like Chris Hemsworth, Tessa Thompson, and my girlfriend really likes the Men in Black films, so we went along to see this one, and it was really poor. That you think, like, you saw them have great chemistry in the Avengers movie, in Thor Ragnarok. You thought, like, these two together, like, this is going to be box office, but it's so poorly written. It has one of the worst climaxes I've ever seen as well in a film. It was just so poor. You thought, why have they brought this franchise back? I'd rather have watched the animated series than this. It was just awful. And it felt like a part of the summer. It's like an uninspired franchise brought back that no one was asking for, and I think that was reflected in the box office, that hopefully people just realize that a name isn't enough to bring it, even if you've got two of the most popular stars on the planet. But what can you do? It's hopefully it's sort of burnout will mean no more Men in Black films, probably at least for a decade anyway.
Yeah, no, I think there was a bit of fallout from that, even from like the people behind the film. They admitted the story wasn't good enough, and I think this is where the phrase franchise fatigue was really starting to kick in, where people thought, well, we can just do anything if it's got some brand recognition attached and it's going to make some money. And I think people were starting to find out that is not the case. You might get some people into the cinema, but really to attract their attention, you need more than that. You need a good story. You need great filmmakers putting their own spin on these films in order to make it something new and something different. And I think that's what we've found all summer long.
Yeah, definitely. So we got to kind of follow on the month. We had Toy Story 4 and Annabelle Comes Home. So what did you make of Annabelle Comes Home? This is one I've never watched any of the Annabelle films, so I can't comment.
I never saw this one, but I'd seen a couple of the other Annabelles, and they are what they are. If 5 years ago you would have said that The Conjuring by James Wan, which is a fantastic horror film, would have spawned about a 9 or 10 film franchise cinematic universe, it would have been very surprising. But it was a doll that featured in like one scene in that film, and now it's got like 3 or 4 films of its own. But I expect it's jump scare after jump scare, but it was just nothing new enough to tempt me into the cinema again. With an unlimited card, I should be going to see everything because I can, but that one passed me by. But I did see Toy Story 4 when I had a spare free moment during the film festival, I think.
Yeah, Toy Story 4, I also saw that one during the film festival, and I wasn't blown away by the trailers, and then I was really not blown away by the film as well. It just felt I couldn't get over it, how unnecessary it felt. Like Toy Story 3 is one of the best endings ever. There's nothing new in that comment, but this one just felt like it was just something that was tagged on, and I just was watching it just like if it had been shoved on like Disney Plus or something like that for launch weekend, I would have been perhaps more forgiving. But just watching this in the cinema, I just felt like, why have you bothered?
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, no, I felt exactly the same as you. It was an unnecessary sort of film, and yeah, it sort of came along. There were some good bits, like Keanu Reeves' character and stuff, but yeah, no, it just seemed completely unnecessary and more of a money making exercise than a need to. The story was finished, but they decided to carry on in it, but it did feel unnecessary. Yeah.
But the counter programming for that month was Yesterday by Danny Boyle, The Last Black Man in San Francisco in America, which is going to be out in a few more months here, and The Dead Don't Die from Jim Jarmusch, and a remake of Child's Play. Did you catch any of these films?
Yes, Dead Don't Die, which I wasn't a fan of at the festival. I mean, it was interesting that Jarmusch was trying to do something different with the zombie movie, but it didn't really sort of work and click for me. And Yesterday, yeah, it was fine enough, but I didn't think it really made the most of its central concept of what would happen if you were the only person who remembered the details and stuff like that. I think there could have been more done with that beyond just the. I understand that it's a standard rom-com and that's the world that the Richard Curtis wants to do, but I think there was more of a story to tell within that.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one yet. I've heard some bits and pieces about it that sound so bizarre that I would quite like to check it out, but I couldn't get over the fact it had annoying Ed Sheeran in it. But The Dead Don't Die was one of my real disappointments of the year. It was a great cast, and it was just one of those ones I was just like watching it going, why is this not working for me? And the self-awareness took me out of the film. I like Tilda Swinton in this, but it feels like she's in a completely separate film, and it just none of that film worked at all. And probably Jim Jarmusch's weakest film for me, but an interesting one. I might check out Child's Play one day because of the Aubrey Plaza connection, but not in a huge rush for that one.
No, yeah, I think Adam Driver and Tilda Swinton are the two reasons to watch Dead Don't Die. The rest of it is not worth it. But I mean, I'm interested to see Child's Play at some point. I know it was basically counter-programming released the same weekend as Toy Story 4, and even to the point where the posters basically had Chucky killing all the toys from Toy Story 4. But I'm interested to see it just for maybe for Mark Hamill's take on the voice, because he does do a great sort of horror icon character. He's done great work in the voice animation for the Joker over the years. So interested to see him put his own spin on that one.
And then July came along, and Spider-Man Far From Home, back in the fond days of when it was part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and The Lion King from Disney as their relentless march continued. So obviously we've touched on Spider-Man Far From Home quite recently. What do you make of sort of the recent fallout as it returns back to Sony?
It was a bit of a surprise, to be honest. I was quite shocked because, as far as I was aware, as long as Disney and Sony managed to get it to $1 billion, then Disney would be able to carry on for at least another film and maybe sort of finish off the trilogy before, I guess, Sony would have rebooted it again and started off with something else. But it does surprise me. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that Disney asked for more money because they did a lot of work for it, but they are reading it's. In some ways, it's admirable that Sony stood up to them and said no, because they probably haven't heard no much recently in the last couple of years in terms of film projects. So that was interesting, but it's disappointing that we won't get to see, and I don't know how it's going to work going forward, but if they're not allowed to use any of the MCU stuff, Happy Hogan and Aunt May, I mean, that relationship will clearly just disappear like the snap and stuff like that. So it'd be interesting, but I mean, the answer was kind of staring them in the face as far as I was concerned. They'd launched successfully the animated Spider-Verse multiverse. So therefore, we had a situation where the MCU could have kept that version of Peter Parker, and then we could have had Miles Morales or another Peter Parker used in that version of the Sony multiverse, and they could have just explained it that way, and I'm sure people would have accepted it and bought it that way. So yeah.
And then it came to The Lion King from Disney, probably one of the most contentious releases from Disney this year. Did you go check this one out? This is one I just couldn't be bothered to check out. I think none of the clips really inspired me to go along and see it. And I think when they showed like the Hakuna Matata video where they did the side by side, where they had this animation with like beautiful bouncing shots, characters full of life. I remember seeing the video. I can't remember if they released something like Jimmy Fallon or not, and like you just see them all sort of just like walking in a straight line, and it just seemed so uninspired. I passed on this one. Did you go to it?
Yeah, no, I did see this one. It was one I think Lucy had wanted to see it, and I actually took my parents as well. I had a bunch of free tickets to use at the cinema, so they were keen to see it. So we all went along, and it was fairly busy, lots of families and stuff. So it was probably a case of the sort of parents who grew up with it as kids taking their kids to see it, but why they couldn't have just stayed at home and stuck on a DVD of the original, who knows? Because I think I mentioned it earlier. This was another case of sticking so incredibly close to the original that you are left wondering what's the point. They keep calling it live action, but this is Jungle Book is slightly more debatable on that because it did have a human character in it, but it's probably the same as Life of Pi that Ang Lee did, where so much of it is done with CGI that where is the cut-off point between animation and live action? And this is just animation. I don't care what they say. It's just because it's computer animation, it's still animation. It's just not the traditional style that Disney used to do. And it was very sort of, I think the problem was because it was the style of animation they've used is basically so realistic that at times it felt you were watching sort of David Attenborough documentary with sort of a Disney voiceover put on top, similar to I think like a spoof they did of March of the Penguins, where they sort of had the narration of what the penguins were really thinking over Morgan Freeman's voiceover. So it kind of felt like that, and it was just another, why are we watching this? What is the point of making it apart from making Disney another $1 billion odd? And some of the voicing things, I thought the sort of Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen as Timon and Pumbaa were good, but the rest of the cast didn't really bring much to the roles to make it their own. And I think it's just another case of we've still got many more, I think, to come. Like you say, we said Lady and the Tramp. We're going to get the one I'm kind of interested in is the Emma Stone as a Cruella de Vil sort of origin story. That I think could be potentially quite interesting. But if you're just going to do cookie cutter copy and paste of the originals, and I think it's, unfortunately, with people going to see them, it seems we're going to get a lot more of them, but eventually they're going to run out of their original properties, and they're going to have to then remake the remake. So who knows when this vicious circle will end. The circle of life will end.
It'll be interesting to see how many of these films end up getting sort of sequels to continue the franchises on, because I can imagine they'll try and do like an Aladdin 2, but not exactly a Return of the Jafar as we kind of knew it from that straight to VHS release. And whether we get another Lion King, for example, it's hard to know what they're going to kind of do next to milk these franchises.
I think there's definitely talk of an Aladdin 2, and I think we're of a generation where I think that's where they can maybe bring some originality into it, because not many people will probably remember the direct-to-video sequels, which were pretty poor, but that sort of ended when because Toy Story 2 was originally meant to be a direct-to-video sequel, but they realised how good it was, and it got a cinematic release, and I think that was pretty much the end of the Disney direct-to-home video market. And so, but I think, a lot of it will depend on the plans for Disney Plus and the eventual rollout over the world. I know there's a lot of angry UK fans who are threatening to pirate The Mandalorian, because it looks like, due to the Sky deal, that the UK will not get Disney Plus until late January 2020, so it's a couple of months to try and avoid spoilers. not going to happen.
No, absolutely not. A24 obviously kept up their counter-programming throughout this summer in America with Midsommar, Skin and Farewell. Obviously the Farewell comes out later this month here, but have you checked out Skin? Did you catch that at the film festival?
No, sadly, I think that was on in the last couple of days of the festival, so I had to give that one a miss. But I think you caught it, didn't you? What did you make of it?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed that one. It was certainly an interesting, in considering the kind of the state of the world just now. Did we need a redemption story about a Nazi skinhead? And the answer to that was, based on Skin, yes. I really enjoyed that one. But Midsommar for me was the best A24 release of the year so far. I think Farewell is certainly going to have something to say about that, but I think the fact that people are still excited about Midsommar, talking about it, the director's cut's coming out, I think it's definitely one of the summer movies that has certainly left an impression. I kind of put it for me that when it went out ahead of against Spider-Man, obviously Spider-Man crushed it, but it seemed that the discourse online, the conversations, the memes, pretty much all revolved around that one film as opposed to Spider-Man, and perhaps it just made that bit of a bigger impact on our culture than Spider-Man.
Yeah, no, I mean, I saw Midsommar opening night preview at a multiplex, and the screening was actually very busy, which I thought was impressive given that this is, 2.5 hour long, 18 rated movie, opening on a Wednesday, the same day as Spider-Man. So, I think it's a bold play by A24, and I think it was Entertainment Film that distributed it in the UK. So good on them for counter programming against it, because there's obviously, as we can see from the box office receipts, a huge appetite and a huge audience for Marvel films, but there are people who do want to watch something else. When a new Marvel film hits, you're looking at a multiplex. 8 out of 10 screens will probably have some version of it, whether it's 3D, 4DX, VIP, super screen, whatever. But there is an audience for it looking for something else. And Midsommar was certainly a world away, although it did have, Americans going to Europe, bad things happen to them. It did have a similar sort of plot thread to it, but, wildly different in the execution. But, I mean, Midsommar is definitely the movie that has stayed with me more than any other film this year, and will easily be in my top 3, top 5, along with Booksmart. I think at the end I thought it was just a sensational piece of filmmaking. Personally, Hereditary is still edging it for me, but I have met a lot of people who actually do prefer Midsommar to Hereditary. But I mean, in terms of feature films, it's 2 out of 2 for Ari Aster so far. And I know we've got the issue that we will probably not get to see the director's cut unless we live within spitting distance of Picture House Central for 1 week of the year, but hopefully A24 will listen to our pleas on the A24 project, which is available now to download, and provide us with a screener.
Yeah, I will be on that as soon as possible. But there was only one film, depressingly enough, in terms of the original films kind of bracket this summer to go above 100 million, and that was Quentin Tarantino's 9th film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which we reviewed recently. So, Dallas, it's been a couple of weeks since we discussed this film. Is it still kind of impacted you?
Yeah, it's still sort of bubbling away. It's just one that, given the length of the film, I just haven't had the time to go back and rewatch, and I know it's going to be difficult for me to do that going forward, because especially with It Chapter 2 coming out, sort of taking over the spot of 18 rated films which are over 2.5 hours, it's going to be difficult to probably for it to keep continuing on in the cinemas by that point. But I believe it has just become Quentin Tarantino's highest grossing UK release as well, which I actually find quite surprising, because it is a bit more, I think, given the sort of true story, again in inverted commas, nature of it, I was wondering how big an appeal it would have. But I mean, it's great to see that, but I would be interested to know sort of how much of that sort of box office gross came from the 35mm screenings, to see how big of an appetite and an audience we have for the sort of the retro type of screening of seeing it on original print, I think.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the breakdown of the digital release, the IMAX release, and the 35mm release. Yeah, it certainly seemed to have a hell of a rollout in sort of film compared to the Hateful Eight. So yeah, hopefully this continues to encourage cinemas to program in the original film format.
Absolutely. And I just want to bring up one other film from July at the moment that I saw and is definitely one of the best films I've seen this year, and that was the documentary Apollo 11, which came out at the beginning of July to sort of coincide with the 50th anniversary of the moon landings, and it helped solve that bit of trivia for me, which is I always forget the third man who went up on the Apollo 11 mission, and it's Michael Collins. So thank you for that. I've actually been able to remember that now, so I'm never going to forget it again. But I thought, just seeing the original sort of archive footage of the sort of the mission and everything like that was just awe-inspiring to see, what humanity could achieve when they put their mind to something, 50 odd years ago with less technology than we're recording this podcast on. And, I just wish that we used our brains and stuff for better things these days. But did you catch this one in the cinema?
Yeah, I did. I really went to see it in IMAX, but the times just kind of escaped me. But I really enjoyed that one. I think we've seen the best documentary winner for 2020 already kind of come up here. I loved it. I found it incredibly gripping, even though you know how that's going to end. You're just that moment of when like the ship's about to land on the lunar surface. You're gripped. I thought it was one of the best films of the year, and it'd be interesting to see if they kind of take this sort of simple format and apply it to any other kind of future subjects.
Yeah, no, and I think what it proved is that Damien Chazelle's First Man is actually a very underrated film, because I think if you watch the two sort of back to back, he actually did a really good job of trying to recreate some of that stuff. So I think First Man is a film which will hopefully get a bit of a reappraisal in the coming years, I think, as well.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And then August came along, and sort of the end of the summer came, and we had Hobbs and Shaw and Angel Has Fallen. So Dallas, what did you make of these two?
Well, Angel Has Fallen, I'm going to start with that one. I saw that last week as just like, I've got a gap to fill, I'm going to go to the cinema. It was after my 10k run. I was like, I just need to chill out, do nothing for a couple of hours. So yeah, watch Gerard Butler sort of scream and shout and shoot some guns off. So yeah, I'll do that. And it was when I watched the trailer. I mean, this is a franchise which I don't think anyone expected to ever sort of get a trilogy, but it has. I remember I think we talked earlier about the sort of ants bug life situation. This was one where we had two terrorists take over the White House films, and this in White House Down. And I think I actually preferred White House Down because it took a sort of slightly more tongue-in-cheek sort of take on the premise. But, for better or worse, we've got a trilogy. And then sort of watching this trailer, I was like, have they gone and basically made a stealth remake of The Fugitive here? Because you've got a man who's basically wrongly framed for a crime to commit. He's in a orange jumpsuit. He's getting taken away in some transport. That transport is then crashed, and then he escapes, and then he has to clear his name with the FBI looking after him and everything like this. And of course, the person who's responsible happens to be linked to him. I mean, it's no I mean, even from watching the trailers or even just the first half hour of the film, I think everyone's pretty much going to be aware of who the real villains of the story are. But, it was a bit of mindless action. Gerard Butler he's carved out a niche career similar to Jason Statham, who I guess we'll get onto in a bit. He knows his niche and he plays into it well. And, it was just a bit of mindless fun, but it was certainly slightly more entertaining than other blockbusters I've watched over the summer. What about yourself?
Yeah, I went to see this one with my girlfriend the other day, and she's never seen any of the Has Fallen trilogy, and I reassured her she didn't need to know anything going in, and she oddly gave it 4 out of 5, which is high praise for her, someone like her, which goes along with her rating, I believe, for 8th grade. So actually it might even be just slightly higher than 8th grade, or my word. But I enjoyed Angels Fallen to an extent. I like the first one a hell of a lot. I prefer that to the White House Down one. But yeah, I really enjoyed Olympus Has Fallen. That attack by the North Koreans on the White House lawn is just one of my most enjoyable action sequences of the past few years. It's just wonderfully over the top. I didn't like the second one. It just went too far. With this one, it sort of pulls it in a little bit towards the end, and I sort of enjoyed sort of the buddy dynamic between father and son, and everyone can see everything coming. I didn't realize that was Tim Blake Nelson as the vice president, former guest on this show as well, it should be added. But yeah, it was a perfectly serviceable Sunday afternoon film, and I kind of saw that with a double bill of Hobbs and Shaw, which I finally got around to seeing the other day after a busy kind of month, and I was a bit disappointed with it, to be honest. I thought it had some good elements, some funny lines and moments, but ultimately for me the film just kind of wore itself out too quickly. Like, it was like if that film had been like 90 minutes, that could have been one of the most enjoyable action sequence films of the past decade or so. But it just kind of was like, yeah, it just, the same with a lot of action films lately. It just goes on too long. It has a running time that is bloated for the sake of it, and it was just one that ultimately just sort of ran out of steam a little bit for me before the end.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I mean, when the Fast and Furious films, which, you know, are all about sort of fast cars and fast living, fast action, ever since I think it was Fast and Furious 5, they've started to creep up to sort of like 2 hours 10, 2 hours 20, and there's not really a need for that with this kind of storytelling. And yeah, I think there's a bit of sort of repetition in terms of the jokes and the action, and maybe one too many action sequences when they're not really needed, and they just, I think they seem to be. You've got such great chemistry between the cast, between The Rock and Jason Statham, and then even with them and the newcomers, sort of Vanessa Kirby and Idris Elba as well, that it seemed like they were having such a great time making it that they didn't really want to ever stop, and so therefore it's kind of led to this sort of overbloated, slightly. Yeah, I think it's a case that it's just a bit, they're having too much fun with themselves and not thinking about the final product. And I think that can be seen in sort of bringing in certain cameos. Now, were you aware by the time you saw of the couple of extended cameos that we were going to get in the film? Or because I mean, I saw it, I think, on opening day with my dad, because we now go and see the Rock film on opening day together. It's now a tradition after fighting with my family, and it will be with Jumanji 2 or 3, or depending however you number the films. But yeah, we were completely shocked and surprised. So, but was that ruined for you by the time that you'd seen it?
Yeah, I'd heard about it, but it didn't overly kind of ruin it for me, especially the fact you see someone like Ryan Reynolds so early on in the film. I think the only thing it spoiled for me is Game of Thrones, if I ever get around to watching it.
Yeah, no, I think that was one of the big things that people complained about online, that they managed to basically, it wasn't the fact that they ruined the cameo, it was the fact that they ruined a TV show for them as well. But I mean, there was something, it's like, I had a theory, which I'm not sure if it's going to play out or not, given the post-credits scenes at the end, but it's like, there was this mysterious voice on the other end of the line, and it sounded like Ryan Reynolds, and I was thinking, well, you don't bring in someone like Ryan Reynolds unless he's going to turn out to be the big bad. I don't know if that's what they're going with down the line, given the post-credit stings, but do you have an idea of who the big bad might be going down the line? Do you think it's someone we've seen before, or are they going to bring in someone, because I did hear talk that they wanted to bring in Keanu Reeves. Now, seeing Keanu Reeves go toe-to-toe with The Rock and stuff like that, I'm kind of excited, and I would definitely watch.
Well, I thought it was going to be revealed to be Ryan Reynolds, because it sounded incredibly like him at so many points. I was like, that's clearly Ryan Reynolds. And when it got towards the end, I thought, oh, it's not him, or well, obviously they've not played their hand yet or whatever, but I just thought it was really obvious that it sounded like him anyway.
No, so I know. Well, I guess we'll have to see how that plays out, and whether or not it's going to tie back into the Fast and Furious franchise, because it did seem fairly separate, and of course the whole Fast and Furious family seem to have forgotten about the fact that Jason Statham killed Han, their friend. You know, they seem to have given him a free pass, and he's off now working side by side with The Rock. But I mean, what did you make of the Scottish cameo in the film, particularly the Gregs just outside of George Square in Glasgow?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting to see Glasgow on the big screen in that George Square once again, as they seem to be the go-to place for filming in Glasgow. But Edinburgh over the next month is going to have 52 different roads shut down so that they can film Fast and the Furious. And I've already had a co-worker become late for work one day this week because of road shutdown closures. And it's actually the front page news in Edinburgh today about some of the Fast and the Furious films. So it sounds like they're going to do a hell of a shoot here for Fast and the Furious in terms of Edinburgh. So it's going to be really exciting to see Edinburgh on screen as Edinburgh in a Fast and the Furious movie, unlike Glasgow, which is basically just dubbed as London.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's I did see articles in the online press about the fact that people were furious about all the road closures because they've just had sort of 4 weeks of the Fringe Festival and all the traffic sort of chaos for that and overcrowding and stuff, and then that finishes, and then Vin Diesel and John Cena rock into town and decide to shut down the entire city to film another movie. But I think it's only surely a good thing that Scotland is getting picked for these sort of shoots of big names. Obviously we've done episodes on the Avengers coming into town and stuff like that. So clearly it's going to be a massive big sequence, and hopefully, like you say, it will be Edinburgh as Edinburgh rather than playing another city in the world. So hopefully we're going to be down for the Empire Film podcast in mid-September, and the filming is still going on by then. Will they be getting some guests along? But I'm certainly going to be down for the afternoon, so I'm going to be heading along to whatever street they've shut off for filming and seeing if I can catch anyone. But rumour has it John Cena's already in the city, but of course you can't see him, so
that's your always go-to wrestling joke. I have nothing but respect for that gimmick.
I'm going to keep it going. I'm going to drive it into the ground.
So kind of finally, what is your kind of looking back on this summer? Has it been a positive one for you?
Overall, I was sort of looking back at my Letterboxd and seeing the reviews and stuff like that I've given, and my top sort of 5 of the summer would basically be your counter programming: Booksmart, Apollo 11, Midsummer, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and The Souvenir probably. So or even that, sort of looking back at some of the classic sort of re-releases we got over the summer. You had Old Boy come back out, The Matrix was 20 years, you had the Apocalypse Now ones, Don't Look Now, they all had sort of re-releases, so it was nice to see them on the big screen. Jaws as well. But in terms of new blockbuster product, there wasn't really anything much to inspire me, apart from probably sort of John Wick 3 was the most fun that I had, and that was at the beginning of the summer. I mean, still, for me, you're not going to beat a blockbuster like Avengers Endgame, especially that sort of portal sequence. That will be my favourite sequence of cinema probably for the year, easily, hands down. But I think we are sort of nearing franchise fatigue, and I think people need to sort of step back and take a look at the quality of the product they're bringing out. They can keep chucking these films into movies, into the cinemas, but people will still see them. But there's going to be a point when people, you've got this whole thing, like Booksmart was one, would it have been more successful if it was released on streaming rather than in the cinemas? And hopefully we will not reach a stage where it's purely blockbusters in the cinemas and everything else is just going for the home cinema release, because I like to watch movies in the cinema. I think it's great to see them on the big screen. That's what, I don't care what anyone says, that is what a movie is made for, is to be viewed in a cinema. And hopefully we'll be able to find that nice balance where films will still be able to get released in cinema before making it on. And I think a lot of that will depend on the upcoming release in November for The Irishman and how wide they go with it. Although I've already heard that certain cinema chains upset with the Roma situation last year will not be screening it. So I think we've still got to see how this whole theatrical window thing's going to play out. So how was your summer then at the cinema?
Yeah, I think you were spot on. My top 5 would be the same as your top 5 there, and it was one of those ones, like, it became a time of, like, whether it's growing up a little bit or just being a bit too busy, was like, I'm not going to make the time for some of these films, whether it was The Lion King or the Godzillas, that were dominant. I just wasn't that fussed about seeing them, and that's a shame. Like, about sort of some of these films, they've just been so uninspired, some mediocre releases, some uninspired choices, but the counter programming has been excellent, and it's disappointing that it perhaps hasn't broken through in the right way. But I suspect, as we kind of said with Booksmart, it's going to be a film we'll continue to watch and dive into, which I think can be said more than some of the films of the blockbuster season. But in terms of recommending kind of other films for people, we'll continue our 52 films by women selection. And Dallas, what's your pick for this week for people to check out?
I'm going to pick Private Life by Tamara Jenkins, and this is on Netflix UK and US at the moment, and it's a film that stars Paul Giamatti and Catherine Hahn, who I think is one of the funniest women in the world, but this is a more sort of dramatic role for her, and it's about an older couple who are trying to conceive and they're failing, so they want to go with an IVF surrogacy, and they get their brother-in-law's daughter to agree to do it, much to the chagrin of the family. And it sort of follows this sort of fractured family dynamic and sort of odd couple family of trying to how the IVF is going to take. Is she going to be able to produce an egg and produce a baby? And it's really a beautiful sort of character study, and it's a really sort of charming and affecting movie. And I think the performances are top notch, and the writing and the directing is excellent. It's definitely one of those sort of hidden gems. It just got a small release, not much fanfare on Netflix, but it's definitely one that I highly recommend people check out. What have you gone for this week?
Yeah, I want to back you up on that one. That was one I caught last year as well on Netflix. While sort of in America, I was having it was like a wet day, couldn't do anything, couldn't go anywhere, and I chucked this one on, and I really enjoyed it. One of Paul Giamatti's his best films in years. But I've gone for The Souvenir by Joanna Hogg, which is out this week in select cinemas. You can also download and stream it from the Curzon app already, and it's going to be at the local film house here in Edinburgh from Friday. So this is one that me and you caught earlier in the year and certainly splits opinion, and I think it has some of the best line deliveries of the year. So I would highly recommend people to check this one out. It's one of those ones that I've struggled to stop thinking about it since its release. I think the more I think about it, the more I think it's a fantastic piece of work, and I'm looking forward to seeing part 2 when it eventually comes out.
I know, and for anyone who heard me giggling there, I'm obviously just thinking of the line, "Oh, Julie, you are a dark horse, aren't you?"
Yeah, exactly. I put that quote up as a tweet early in like June, and every so often when the film has kind of gone out to more and more audiences, that one has found a bit more love on Twitter. So yeah, definitely one of the best lines of the year, and a film I really recommend people to check out. So go counter-programming.
Absolutely, and if you haven't seen The Souvenir yet, you'll have no idea what it refers to, but it will make total sense when you finally see the film why we find it so funny. Definitely.
So thank you very much to everyone for joining this week. If people wanted to reach out to you, Dallas, where can people find you online?
They can get me on Twitter at champcelluloid, and I'm also the same handle on Instagram as well.
Yeah, you can find me on the same platforms as well at Lee_Nostromo. So I look forward to chatting with you all next week, and enjoy your autumn. Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.